with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Thursday, February 15th, 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Premilla Nadasen, author of Care, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. And later in the show, Hasan Ali will be with us to talk about the turmoil in Pakistan's elections. Meanwhile, Israeli forces raid Nasser Hospital as over 1 million Palestinian refugees in Rafah, the furthest southern tip, brace themselves for death ahead of a ground invasion. That ground invasion has drawn condemnation from some Western leaders, including Biden, but not enough to cut funding. Netanyahu withdraws from peace talks with Hamas in Cairo, further rebuffing calls for a ceasefire and expanding the conflict with deadly airstrikes in Lebanon, and potentially using white phosphorus in those Lebanon attacks.
Israel is not a partner for peace.
That's the understatement of the century, and true, yeah. A second Palestinian-American child has been murdered in the West Bank in 2024. What will Biden do? Back in the U.S., a shooting at the Chiefs Super Bowl parade, it's the most American sentence ever uttered, leaves 1 dead and over 20 injured, including children. By the way, 800 cops were at the scene. Trump's hush money criminal trial date has been set for March 25th. Polling shows Biden and Trump are neck and neck in Michigan. Democrats have only lost Michigan once since 1992. And people remember who lost that. Hillary Clinton, folks. That's not a good sign. The Senate is set to quickly reject the House's sham impeachment of Mayorkas. New York Democrats, who love to be wrong, rush to draw broad conclusions about Swazi's victory and want to run to the right on the border. Meanwhile, Texas National Guardsmen tell HuffPost that Abbott's violent Operation Lone Star is, quote, a show for campaign ads. Thousands of gig drivers strike in major cities yesterday, including Los Angeles, disrupting Valentine's Day. Good stuff. And lastly, alarm bells in Indonesia as its incumbent defense minister, right-wing extremist, let's see if I can do this, Prabowo Subianto, maybe, appears to have won the presidential election. This is not good news, folks. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am back, folks. Your left testicle writes in, says, nice to see you back today, Emma. Thought you might have been sick when you weren't on yesterday. Glad to see you're in decent health. I'm in fine health. I just take the occasional Wednesday off.
Usually every other Wednesday, but sometimes you like to work through your days off and they stack up.
I know. It's just like I feel guilt about missing 100%, the show.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
Yeah.
Even though Sam's like fine with it.
Never any sort of issue. He barely even notices when you ask, but I know.
But still, I just am like, oh man, I should be working. And, you know, I also get excited about interviews that I want to be a part of or I want to hear. Yesterday, I thought about coming in regardless, but Sam's off next week, so I was like, okay, let me just take one day off. Because yesterday's interview, which I watched later, with, what was the doctor's name? can you say?
Dr. Thayer Ahmad.
Thayer Ahmad, was absolutely gut-wrenching. And I want to pick up really where Sam left off here. Because, as I mentioned in headlines, the Israeli army is assaulting Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis with...
which is where Dr. Ahmad was.
Yes. Khan Yunis is one of the cities that is further south in Gaza. Rafah is even further south than Khan Yunis. It's the basically southernmost tip.
This is where they're supposed to go.
Strip. Yes, of the open-air prison, of the camp in which these 2+ million Palestinians have been concentrated. If you want to run with that definition, I'm fine with it. For decades at this point. They've just completely decimated the north. Now they are assaulting the largest functioning hospital in the south, in Khan Yunis, in Nasser Hospital, and a ground invasion appears imminent in Rafah, where over 1 million refugees are sheltering, and dozens have already been killed as they slept in their tents because their homes have been already demolished by Israel. And so, that was supposed to be the safe zone. There is nowhere left to go. Egypt doesn't want Palestinian refugees. You can debate that, the humanity of that. I don't agree. I think they should let in whoever, but at the same time, they also think we're enabling this ethnic cleansing, and I've got my own domestic concerns. And, by the way, Egypt receives a ton of military aid from the United States. So our fingerprints are all over the situation. The buck stops with Biden and, of course, the genocidal maniac Netanyahu, who is just unilaterally withdrawing from peace talks, refusing to engage, because the genocide is what he wants to do. And it's either...
this has been policy since the formation of Israel, let's be real.
Of course. But, I still don't know what story I need to communicate. We need to communicate. People need to hear for it to finally break through. And yet we'll try, because as that remarkable interview Sam conducted with the doctor who worked in Nasser Hospital, as was discussed during that interview, these are the unseen horrors of this genocide. Women who have just had C-sections, their stitches still raw from hours before their stomachs sliced open, being forced to flee their hospital beds, orphaned children without limbs, shaking from PTSD due to the bombs that we pay for being dropped on them and their families without pain medication. And stories like this. This is Sky News' John Sparks, who does this report, speaks to 3 young children who are now orphans. And one child is special needs. Their parents were killed in a house raid by Israeli soldiers in December. And this is their life now.
People in Gaza have been driven into the corners of the enclave. Life now lived in temporary cities erected around functioning hospitals. At the Gaza European Hospital, people camp outside the emergency department because there's not enough room inside, not enough space for the wave of suffering seen and experienced on the strip. On the second floor, there's a 5-year-old boy who was hit by a grenade. A fragment passed through his eye and lodged in his brain. But that's just part of Mumin's story. His brother and sister watched it all.
It was lunchtime. We were sitting down.
11-year-old Ahmed Hattab was in the kitchen when Israeli soldiers broke into the family home.
They raided our house and they shot our mum and dad. Then they started shooting at us.
His sister, Buthena, is 9.
We went to another room, hiding from the soldiers. They started banging on the door, and then they blew it up.
In the first week of December, the Israel Defense Forces launched the second phase of their ground invasion in Gaza, targeting the
Okay, we can skip ahead a little bit here because we already know a lot of this, but towards the end, Bradley, where the families continue to tell their story here, because this kind of just fills in what I already said. Their parents were killed. Do we know where we're starting? Okay. So here we go. Yeah.
On December 7th, Father Mohammed Hatab called his brother, a doctor, to alert the Red Cross. Their house had been surrounded by Israeli armor. His brother used WhatsApp. He said that the tanks behind the house and excavator destroyed the near house. It's very difficult to move without permission. This is Mohammed's brother, Omar Hatab, a pediatric surgeon at the Gaza European Hospital.
My brother called me and he said, talk to anybody to deliver us from there because it's very difficult. The situation was very difficult. Shots around the house. So I went to Red Cross and talked with them. I was very, very worried.
Increasingly alarmed, Dr. Omar tried the Red Cross the following day. I called my brother and he said, the tanks around the house. Can't move at all. It's complicated. Mohammed's son, Mumin, has cerebral palsy. Moving him is difficult, and they wanted to notify the Israelis in advance. On WhatsApp, the Red Cross was reassuring. Their representative said, we've ensured that the houses would not be bombed or destroyed at night and in the future. Their confidence was badly misplaced. These images were posted by the Israelis in mid-December. We see troops applying overwhelming force in residential areas surrounding the Hatab family's home. On December 15th, IDF soldiers stormed their house. The children's aunt, Dua Hatab, says she was in the kitchen when the troops came in.
They knocked down the front wall and entered the house. We were sitting down having lunch at the time. Then my brother Mohammed was shot. He was at the front, waving a white flag.
A grenade was thrown into the crowded kitchen, injuring Mohammed's wife, Hind. Family members say a soldier then shot and killed her. The device blinded Mumin in his left eye. Israeli soldiers found his brother and sister hiding in the bedroom.
They were interrogating us, asking us to show them the tunnels and to tell them where the resistance fighters were. Then they gave us a white flag and told us to walk down Salahuddin Street.
We can go to the end if you want. Just wrap it up. I think it's this is good journalism. Good job, Sky News. I want to hear more of these stories, especially just seeing this kid in the wheelchair. Where are they supposed to go? And then the idea that they were given white flags, which was the same way that their father was killed, waving one. We'll wrap this up here.
And an IDF base thrust into the district to the north. The surviving family members walked through that battlefield, reaching Gaza European Hospital the following day. Every time the children cried, someone shot at them, they said. Now, Buthena sits amongst the tents with her colored pencils. Her favorite color? Pink, she says. Both she and brother Ahmed struggle to speak of their ordeal. Their aunt and uncle are busy now, learning to care for their disabled nephew. They say Mumin cries all night, They don't know how to make him happy.
They've lost their father and mother in one day, at the same time in front of their eyes. This is a really difficult thing. No one can cope with this. No one can.
We provided the IDF with a detailed description of timings, events, and coordinates of the Khattab family home. It declined to comment. The Red Cross said responsibility for protecting civilians lies with the parties to the conflict. Robbed of their parents, robbed of their home. 3 orphans in Gaza, left to question the incomprehensible. John Sparks.
Thank you, John Sparks. Well done report. And I don't know, exactly what to say to that, except I think what struck me most in that clip, too, was the fact that they were interrogating those little children.
Yeah. I mean, psychopathic.
There's now this propaganda effort to say that, kids and women took part in the Hamas attack on October 7th. I mean, just the most brazen propaganda. And
well, to distract from those images, they say, well, there's tunnels or some shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us where the tunnels are. Folks, it's really, Biden is older than the state of Israel. Our history is something that we are continuing to live through. And unfortunately, we have abstracted the Holocaust and the genocide there from history and from the course of history and from what genocides we have perpetrated. After the Holocaust, the United States enabled, under Kissinger, multiple genocides, including his role in carpet bombing Cambodia. This is not genocide in the Holocaust. The Holocaust was industrialized, and its scale and its scope and the millions that were exterminated. It's one of the worst crimes in history. But genocides in general are unfortunately still quite common. And it is up to us to make sure that we see the continuation of genocide perpetuation as not a siloed event, but as something that is enabled by systems and by those in power. And so democratizing the term genocide, as I say, and understanding what it really means, I think gives people a sense of this kind of warfare, we're calling this war, should no longer be acceptable in modern society. And yet
1.9 million people displaced. I'm sorry, the idea that you're stepping on any kind of toes with using the term genocide is a preposterous Zionist lie. I mean, it's an insult to that term, and like you say, what it should actually be used for. And
well, I want to start comparing them to Nazis at this point.
IDF is Nazis.
Because you want to quibble with the term genocide.
They should be hunted like Nazis were, in Argentina or whatever.
In polite conversation, I don't give a crap anymore. Okay.
No.
You gotta let's
Biden's
digest it.
Yeah, Biden's older than Israel. I hope we all outlive it.
All right, word from some of our sponsors before we get to 2 great interviews that we have today. Earth Breeze. Folks, some New Year's resolutions are destined to fail. But lucky for you, I have an easy resolution that we can all make, and it will make your life easier, be kinder to our planet, and transform the way that you do laundry in 2024. Switch to Earth Breeze. And Earth Breeze has a deal for our audience. Right now, you can subscribe to Earth Breeze and save 40%. Go to earthbreeze.com/majority to get started. We would like to thank Earth Breeze for supporting our show. Yes, thank you, Earth Breeze, because I know what you're thinking. Laundry is not fun. Buying those huge, heavy plastic jugs and measuring out just the right amount of detergent when getting goo all over the place is infuriating. And from my perspective, I live in a 1-bedroom apartment. Those jugs take up a ton of space. So I don't like them at all. This is the perfect solution, and it's good for the planet. Thankfully, EarthBreeze has heard our cries. Now, Eco Sheets are here to change the game. EarthBreeze looks like a dryer sheet, but it is ultra concentrated laundry detergent. So it just cuts down on the space by exponential amounts. It could not be easier. Just throw a sheet in with your laundry and watch it dissolve in any wash cycle, hot or cold. No measuring, no mess, and best of all, no clunky plastic jug. EarthBreeze fights everyday stains and odors, gives you an amazing clean every time. It's gentle on the skin. I love that EarthBreeze is dermatologist tested, hypoallergenic, free of bleach and dyes. It is perfect for every load that I have, bedding, towels, even my delicates. The best part is you'll never run out of detergent again. Thanks to EarthBreeze's flexible subscription, you can adjust, pause, or cancel at any time with no hidden fees or penalties. You'll save a whopping 40% when you subscribe, and shipping is always free. That's the money you'll save, and the space it's incredible. Eco Sheets are packed in a slim cardboard envelope. It saves a ton of space. Switching to EarthBreeze won't only make laundry easier for you, but also easier on the planet. They've made plastic jugs in my apartment a thing of the past. And if EarthBreeze doesn't end up being the 2024 update of your dreams, you don't even have to return it. Just let them know it's not for you, and you will get a full refund, no questions asked. Right now, our listeners can get started with EarthBreeze and save 40%. 40. Go to earthbreeze.com/majority. That's EarthBreeze, Earth, BREEZE.com/majority for 40% off your subscription. Thank you, EarthBreeze, for sponsoring this program. And this is one of my favorite sponsors as well, because I'm a cereal person. But I get kind of sick of like flaxseed and all this, stuff that does not taste very good. But I have to have it because I'm an adult, and some of the other brands that have sugar in it, I feel a little bit like a kid when I have it. And it also just makes me crash because there is so much sugar in some of those brands.
When you eat cookie-based cereals?
Yes, maybe. I mean, I don't know if we should get into the specifics of what I'm talking about, but you guys know what I'm talking about. The stuff that completely changes the milk's color within 10 seconds. That's the kind of stuff that I'm into. But Magic Spoon has gotten me off of that crap. It has reinvented your favorite childhood cereals to taste great, but each serving contains 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and 4 to 5 grams of net carbs per serving. The protein part too is great because I notice my day is different if I don't have some protein in the morning. It is keto friendly, gluten free, grain free, and soy free. It's a way to relive those moments watching your favorite cartoons, but it's 140 calories per serving. They have flavors like cocoa, fruity, frosted, peanut butter, blueberry muffin, maple waffle, honey nut, birthday cake, chocolate chip cookie, Matt, and cinnamon roll. Magic Spoon also offers treats, which are the perfect on-the-go snack. They're just like a little marshmallow treat that you had as a kid, but with only 1 gram of sugar and 1 to 2 grams of net carbs, and they're packed with 11 grams of protein per bar. They come in 2 flavors, marshmallow and chocolatey peanut butter. They're, again, just like having a little bit of protein in those sweet snacks without the guilt about the sugar. It really is just a great product. Head to magicspoon.com/majority report, one word, to grab a custom bundle of cereal and try the magic for yourself. And don't forget to add their delicious treats for on the go. Be sure to use our promo code Majority Report at checkout to save $5 off your order. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it is backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they will refund your money. No questions asked. Remember, start the new year off right with a delicious bowl of high-protein cereal at magicspoon.com/majority report and use the code Majority Report to save $5 off. Thank you, Magic Spoon, for sponsoring this episode and my breakfast. All right, quick break. We'll be back in just a second. are back, and we are joined now by Premilla Nadasen, professor of history at Barnard College, distinguished lecturer for the Organization of American Historians, author of her latest book, Care, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. Premilla, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Emma. It's great to talk to you.
Great to talk to you as well. Back for our Peacock show, we had a conversation about your piece in The Nation surrounding this topic of care work and its importance and how it came to the fore in the pandemic. Let's just start there. How our collective experience in this country in the pandemic exposed these massive, massive gaping holes in the way we've structured our society as it relates to care work.
Yeah. So, care, when we talk about care work, I think it's important to define what it is we're talking about. And so care, I think, is all the labor that allows us to sustain ourselves day to day, allows us to live and thrive. As Domestic Workers United, organization here in New York City, said, it's the work that makes all other work possible. The feeding, the nurturing, the assisting and loving human beings. And this was traditionally women's work, although it is now largely in the marketplace. And during the pandemic, I think what we saw is a real discrepancy in who was cared for and how they were cared for. So some people's care is privileged over other people's care. So there was visible recognition of essential workers and care workers during the pandemic. And I was outside at 7 p.m., like a lot of people in New York City, banging pots and pans as a way to acknowledge and appreciate care workers. So we do talk about the value of this work. But those essential workers didn't always get the pay and the benefits and the protections that they needed. And in fact, their service was very often framed as necessary to care for other people, right? So they were considered important to the degree that they took care of other more privileged people, but their well-being was often not mentioned, or if it was mentioned, it depended upon the care work that they provided.
Essential work, but what is the essentiality of it, or what is so essential about it? It's one, we saw, I believe it was the lieutenant governor of Texas, or maybe the attorney general, I forget who. It was the lieutenant governor at the time, at the outset, maybe, spring 2020, saying, well, I think grandma and grandpa would be happy to get people back to work and sacrifice themselves if it meant getting the economy back on track. And that just stuck out to me as a real a wonderful example of the priorities of the kind of get back to work crowd at the outset of the pandemic and who bore the brunt of that. I mean, the essential workers ranged from different fields, from medical workers, as you describe, hospital workers, to just minimum wage workers working at McDonald's or wherever, or DoorDash delivery drivers. But care workers in particular, it's just this very direct relationship of some people deserve to be cared for, and they're the people that can pay for care. And some people, this kind of underclass of largely women of color, are there to be the caregivers for profit. And that's much of what you explore, of course, in your book.
That's right. And so we as a society, I think, value care, and we talk about the importance of care, but there is a large sector of our population that is not cared for. Since the mid-1990s, we have not had anything like a welfare system in this country. Welfare has been dismantled, has been turned into block grants. And so poor single mothers don't really have an alternative apart from entering the labor market. The jobs that are available for people who are care workers or low-wage workers is not enough to raise a family. And so I think that question of how people are able to survive right now is critical. We have something like 40 million Americans who are living in poverty, right? 1.5 million American households live in what is called extreme poverty, nearly twice as many. And so I think the question we have to ask is, what kind of support systems exist that's outside the marketplace that is available for people who are the most marginalized, who are most in need? Many of these care workers who you're talking about don't have guaranteed benefits, don't have health insurance themselves, don't have a system to rely on if for some reason they have to exit the labor market, don't have a way to find affordable childcare for their own children, or often separated from their children. Many of these are migrant workers who are coming from abroad, who have no choice but to leave their children in their home countries. And many of them are undocumented, which means that they are also vulnerable to exploitation by their employers and by the state. And so it's a really crucial situation where we have actually not cared for people who are providing essential labor to all of us. If we didn't have childcare workers, we wouldn't be able to go to work every day, right? If we didn't have people who are producing the food, we wouldn't be able to feed ourselves every day. So it's really important work, and I think needs to be acknowledged and recognized in a material way.
Absolutely. And, it reminds me of how in September of last year, Gavin Newsom in California actually vetoed a bill that came through the Democratic legislature in the state that would have allowed housekeepers, nannies, and other workers who work in domestic workplaces, they would have had rights under OSHA. This is a Democratic governor who clearly has broader aspirations, who vetoed a bill giving domestic workers rights. Just your response to that, and I guess we can talk about it in less like an electoral partisanship way and more just about capitalism.
Yeah. Well, there's a long history of exclusion of domestic workers from the rights of labor. Back in the 1930s, that was a key turning point when most workers in this country got the basic rights that we think of as necessary for people to work in this country. Minimum wage, Social Security benefits, the right to organize. Those are the three pillars of the 1930s New Deal program. Domestic workers were excluded from that, as were agricultural workers, because these were largely non-white occupations, mostly African Americans who worked in those two occupations. And that long history has carried forward. Domestic workers today do have the right to Social Security and to minimum wage, although we know that that's not enforced in most cases. But they don't have rights to OSHA protections, and they do not have the right to organize and bargain collectively. And so I think we have to ask ourselves, why is that the case? Why is it that these workers, who we all have acknowledged vis-a-vis the pandemic, how important this work is, and this question of childcare now is a huge one for most Americans, why don't these workers have the basic rights and protections that most other workers in this country have?
Well, I think the answer is leverage, right? I mean, it's the same reason we militarize the border and make it so difficult for folks to get citizenship. The dirty secret is that people having less protections or having that point of leverage over them when it comes to their undocumented status, but also their lack of union representation or formal kind of recognition, it allows for more exploitation.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the question of organizing and people's ability to organize is really crucial. And domestic workers have begun to organize outside the formal union structure. And I think that's been really important in terms of raising the questions and the issues that are important for this workforce. But I still think we have a long way to go. I think there's so much emphasis on, as you said a few minutes ago, about getting people back into the workforce, that I think there is a sense that we have to do that at all costs, even if it means the exploitation of a certain class of workers. But the other question I would raise, Emma, is why don't we have a system where families can take care of their own children? Right? Why is the framework always one of forcing people into the labor market? There are middle-class families, there are poor families who actually do want to stay home and take care of their own children. If we value child raising, if we value parenting, we should actually have some kind of child allowance, which is widespread in Europe, that allows families to stay home and take care of their children, whether they're poor or middle class or wealthy.
Certainly, and you talk about this in your book about how in the 1970s, neoliberalism, the kind of shredding of the social safety net really gave rise to this industry in the United States. Talk a bit about that turn and how care work kind of became this own industry unto itself.
Yeah, I think the 1970s was a crucial turning point. Prior to that, we did have a welfare state. We had a system of economic support, a government system of economic support that provided stipends, however inadequate they were, provided stipends to poor single mothers. We had, there were social movements that called for expanding economic support for families and mothers in particular. The Wages for Housework movement was one that was an international movement that fought for wages for housewives. This was a mostly middle class white movement, but they gained some traction. We had a campaign to push for national daycare, right? And that was vetoed by President Nixon. And then in the 1970s, we begin to see the dismantling, the slow dismantling, the attacks on the welfare system. And by 1996, all forms of government support on the national level have essentially been dismantled. And so today we have a system where people are thrust into a low wage labor market, earning far less than is necessary, that is well below the poverty line if you're earning minimum wage. And in fact, very few alternatives. I work with a group in Mississippi that is fighting for basic rights for poor families. And Mississippi is one of the poorest states in the country. And the average monthly stipend for a family, average monthly welfare stipend for a family in Mississippi is $260 for a family of three, which is outrageous. And in fact, much of the welfare money in Mississippi has actually gone into the private sector, because what the state does is they take those welfare dollars and they contract out private companies who then administer the program, or who run training programs, or who hire lecturers. There's been a huge scandal in Mississippi around this. And so for me, it's a real question of political priorities and who's benefiting from these state programs at the moment.
Sir, yes, and I mean, of course, since we spoke in 2021, I think the child tax credit died on the vine due to Joe Manchin and other more conservative Democrats making it so that that program would essentially sunset, even though we know that it lifted millions and millions of children out of poverty in this country. I mean, in writing your book, in the midst of that moment, what did that say about our country's priorities when it comes to childcare and care work as well?
There was such a contradiction between the rhetoric that we heard about what people valued, or especially vis-a-vis care work, around what we saw day to day in our own communities, and the families we interact with, that we interacted with, the void that we saw around care work, and what was happening around the child care tax credit. We know that the child care tax credit was a huge benefit to so many families. It lifted people out of poverty in a way that we had not seen since the 1930s. And so it is a bit shocking that, given that history of the pandemic, that in fact that bill failed. And I will say, I think we need to push for an expanded child tax credit, just like we had during the pandemic. But I also think it even needs to be more expansive than those proposals. There are, we know, undocumented children who did not benefit even from the expanded child tax credit. So I think we need to think about the gaps and the loopholes in the child tax credit, and think about how to make sure it is in fact universal and covers everyone.
Absolutely. Can you touch on the racial politics of this, and particularly care workers, in the South, but all over the country, being Black women in many instances, and how some of the continued structures of slavery, Jim Crow, etc., are brought into the forefront by some of those dynamics?
Well, the primary reason why African American women ended up being the the central labor force as domestic workers up until the 1960s was because of the history of slavery. African American women served as domestic workers, especially in the South, but then also in the North during slavery and after the end of slavery. Other occupations were closed to them, so they were essentially shuttled into domestic work after emancipation. When they began to leave domestic work in the 1960s with the removal of racial barriers to occupations, we saw large numbers of immigrant women, mostly women from the global South, who started working as domestic workers. So race has been really fundamental to shaping this occupation and the workforce, in part because these women are so underpaid and so marginalized that race becomes the lens through which I think employers sometimes justify the low wages. And so it serves a kind of ideological function to think of these workers who some people might think they just need less than I do, right? It's okay to pay them a little less. It's okay if they work a little longer. They're different. That question of difference, I think, is key. I will also say, so race is important in terms of thinking about who's doing this work and how they're treated, how they're marginalized. It's also important because the care work of these women for their own families has always been undervalued. So African American women historically left their homes and lived in with families who they worked for, even when they had their own children. So they had very little time to spend with their own children. The migrant women who are leaving their children in another country, their care work for their own family is devalued. And of course, the best example of that is the system of welfare, which when it started was intended to assist white widows for the most part. And when women of color, Puerto Rican women and African American women began to enter the welfare rolls in the 1950s and the 1960s is when the program became more punitive and work rules were first instituted. And so that's another indication of how there really has never been state support for the mothering work of Black and brown women in this country.
We have a viewer, IM, and I think you may have touched on it, but I wanted to make sure Margot from Massachusetts question gets answered. How would you distinguish between care work and reproductive labor? Is it because care work includes jobs that are paid in the market, whereas reproductive laborers only are unpaid, or is there more overlap?
Mm-hmm. I would want to know what Margot means by reproductive labor. If it's just about birthing, that is, obviously there are not people who are paid for that. Apart from surrogates are paid for that labor. But Marxist feminists have historically used the term social reproductive labor to refer to care work, and I think that term is actually really useful, perhaps more useful than the term care work. So they understand social reproductive labor as all the labor necessary to maintain and sustain and reproduce human life, whether it's inside the household or outside the household, whether it's paid or unpaid. And it includes education. It includes healthcare. It includes feeding people. It includes everything we think of that is necessary for our lives. I think it's a really useful term because it moves us away from care, which is often associated with emotion. We think about care workers as people who should be invested in the labor emotionally. And social reproductive labor, I think, helps us think about it in a structural framework, that this is work that is about social reproduction.
Right. Well, that'll be my last question, and I'll let you go, Premilla, because that is the piece that is so frustrating. The expectation of emotional labor for care workers on top of the sacrifices that you talk about, because inherently the social reproductive element comes into play, families, childbirth, elder care, right? This kind of, or child care, all these things are involved. Can you talk about the emotional labor that care workers have to engage in?
Yeah, and I've spoken to a lot of domestic workers about this. I do a lot of work here in New York and around the country. And many domestic workers love their jobs. right? And they might even love the people who they work for and the children they care for, but they don't do the work because of that love. They do the work because of the wages that allow them to survive day to day. And I think that's the important distinction. And there might be workers who don't love the people who they care for, but they do a good job. So I think we need to separate the kind of work that somebody does and whether or not they do their job from their emotional investment in it. You know, we don't expect other people in other occupations. I'm a professor, right? I might love my students, I might not love my students, but the question is, do I do my job? And so I think we have to think critically about whether we ask domestic workers to invest in this labor emotionally, and if so, why.
Premilla Nadasen, the book is called Care, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, professor of history at Barnard College. We will put a link to your book wherever people are listening to or watching this and at majority.fm. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Emma. Great to speak with you.
Great to speak with you as well. All right, folks, quick break. And then when we come back, we're going to be talking to Hasan Ali about Pakistan. We are back, and we are joined now by Hasan Ali, journalist covering U.S. foreign policy and South Asian politics, whose recent piece in The Nation is entitled The Unexpected and Uncertain Result of Pakistan's Elections. We have a little bit of a delay, so people listening, just be mindful of that. Hasan, thank you so much for coming on the program.
My pleasure, Emma. How are you?
I'm doing well. I hope you are as well. Let's start with Imran Khan. We'll start fairly broadly for those who may not be familiar with who he is, what he represented when he became prime minister, up into the constitutional, crisis that saw him removed from power and then imprisoned. If you could just take us through that history, that recent history.
Sure, yeah. Where does one begin with Imran Khan? I mean, I guess the first thing that you have to say is that he is the Pakistani celebrity, right? I mean, he's like the most famous man in this country, and has been for the best part of 40 years. He was, I mean, I know cricket hasn't really watched, it's not considered a real sport in the US, but, I mean, in the Commonwealth and the former colonies, it's kind of a big deal. So he was the cricket captain of the Pakistan national team, and he led the team to glory when it won the World Cup in 1992. Now, I mean, the country's only been around since 1947. So, I mean, this is one of the milestones in Pakistan's history. So he basically cemented his title as, as a hero in the eye of the public a pretty long time ago. And his political sort of fortunes have been patchy. He's essentially, a right-wing populist, in the mold of Donald Trump, I would say. I mean, like, that is the person that he's been compared to most of all. People in America kind of find that a little bit unsettling when I say that. But, I mean, I think Trevor Noah was the first person who made the analogy, made the comparison, and it holds. He was co-opted or promoted by the Pakistan Army sometime after 2013, because the Pakistan military establishment had really poor relations with the two main political parties in Pakistan, which is the PMLN and the PPP. I mean, they'd hung one of their leaders, Mr. Bhutto, and exiled another. And so, like when Nawaz Sharif won the 2013 election, the Pakistan military kind of started to cultivate Imran Khan as this kind of like third way candidate, this person who could sort of rid Pakistan once and for all from like these sort of like from the grips of these dynastic political parties. Fast forward to 2018, and in a really controversial election, Imran Khan became prime minister. Nawaz Sharif at the time was jailed just in the run-up to the election. So Mr. Khan and the army sort of created what later became known as the hybrid regime, right? Which was essentially the military would take, substantive policy decisions, and then they'd need, like a political leader, a popular political leader to kind of carry the can, to take responsibility. And for 4 years, it's sort of they kind of did that. Problem is that if the power resides with a whole bunch of generals who are, never in the public eye, and then the person who has to carry the can for their policies is someone who's got to get reelected, I mean, you can see how that sort of works, right? Eventually you're going to fall out, and that's what happened. General Qamar Javed Bajwa, who is the chief of army staff, then sponsored a vote of no confidence against Mr. Khan in April 2022. They'd fallen out spectacularly, even though they'd been, like sick as thieves for the best part of, like 4 years. And from then on, Mr. Khan just became like the anti-army candidate. I mean, he went on this speaking tour, basically accusing the Pakistan Army of collaborating with the CIA to topple his government. And that's the sort of atmosphere in which the May the 9th riots happened. I know how much your listeners will know about those. Essentially, Imran Khan was arrested, and his supporters went on this large-scale protest. Some of those protests turned violent, and those protests were against the military, right? So they attacked a bunch of military buildings. And the military just went after them. They went after Imran Khan and his party. Something like 10,000 of his activists were thrown in jail. 100 of his sort of party stalwarts were forced to defect. The ones who remained loyal to him were, roughed up, thrown in jail. A lot of them are still in jail. A lot of them were forced underground. And so this was the sort of the atmosphere that led up to the 2024 general election. There are two important things that happened just before the election, just leading up to it, and those are worth mentioning. The first is that the PTI, the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, which is the name of Imran Khan's political party, so it had its symbol stripped from it, right, which was a cricket bat. Now the symbol is there are about 60 million people in Pakistan who are classified as illiterate. The symbol basically is the picture on the ballot that tells people who can't read or write where to tick, where to place their cross on the ballot paper, essentially. The other thing it does, though, is if you strip a party of a political symbol in that way, it effectively means that party no longer exists. It ceases to exist. So it's sort of like all the candidates who were formerly PTI were running as independents, right? So that's a huge disadvantage in a place like Pakistan. And then finally, with a week to go to the poll, Imran Khan was convicted in 3 separate court cases. The first was he was sentenced in a case which was to do with his mishandling of a diplomatic cable. And then he was convicted in another case which was to do with financial corruption. And bizarrely, he was convicted in a third case which was to do with not having contracted a marriage in accordance with Islamic law. And all of this happens, within the space of 4 or 5 days. Pretty obvious what was going on. I mean, the sort of powers that be wanted to make him as unpopular as they possibly could with a whole bunch of constituencies in the country, like the religious right, for instance, the patriotic sort of, foreign policy buffs, if you know what I mean. And the thing is, the expectation, therefore, was that last Thursday's polls would be a foregone conclusion, like an easy victory for the PMLN. But the people of Pakistan had different ideas. They still came out and voted for Imran Khan. They found a way.
I mean, so there's so much there. One, two, Khan has accused the CIA. Sorry. Oh, Khan has accused the CIA of orchestrating his removal from office. It's well documented, right, that the United States does not like Imran Khan. I know that Ryan Grimm and Murtaza Hussain had a big story last year about the fact that there was a State Department document that showed that they would basically prefer if Imran Khan was no longer in power because of his position on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That's interesting to me. I'm also interested in, the Donald Trump characterization. Is it fair to say that from a political perspective? I mean, what are his politics? And why is he not basically the U.S.'s favorite, I guess? And also, what does he represent politically within the context of Pakistani politics?
So let me take the first one, your first question. I mean, you were talking about, you were discussing sort of the story that Ryan Grimm and Murtaza Hussain wrote in The Intercept, right? I mean, I'm familiar with their reporting, and I respect them a lot as journalists. They're much more experienced than I am. But I remain unconvinced by this, just simply because, everybody knows that, everybody knows that the U.S. has been involved in regime change, throughout the world. This is not new information. I mean, it's happened all over the world. My issue is, if you really did want to topple Imran's government, why would an undersecretary of state go and have a conversation with the Pakistani ambassador, whose job it is to then relay this information to Imran Khan, right? Sounds like a pretty stupid conspiracy if that's what it is, like pretty incompetent. I mean, one thing I will say about the State Department, I haven't dealt with them much. They don't seem like stupid people to me. The State Department and the Pentagon have had a direct line to General Headquarters in Rawalpindi for just about as long as I've been around, probably longer. Why didn't they do that? I mean, why would you go to the ambassador whose job it is to then report to the civilian government?
Sure, sure.
So that's why we
can be skeptical, I think.
That's why I'm unconvinced by it.
I don't think we need to be convinced by the coup, the coup claim, right? But we can agree essentially that the United States wasn't thrilled with Imran Khan. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reason for that, which goes to the second part of your the second part of your question, you asked me why that might be the case, right?
Right. Right.
Look, when we talk about populism in the context of Pakistani politics, what is the number one thing that sells? Well, there are a couple of things that sell. I mean, if for a politician who wants to reach out to his voter or wants to bring people to his side, there are two main things that sell and have sold for nigh on 50 years. Anti-Americanism is number one, and probably, religious orthodoxy as a binding force, that's probably number two, okay? So, I mean, yes, Imran Khan has been critical of the United States in a very public way for virtually his entire political career, I wrote a piece in The Nation when he was still prime minister, before his relationship with the military essentially became fraught, saying that he planned to fight the next election as an anti-America candidate. That was going to be what he was going to do. That's how he was hoping to win the 2024 election. it turned out to be true, but not perhaps in the way that I thought it had. I mean, your question about this, what Imran Khan's politics represents,
right?
In
Pakistan
is a really interesting one.
Yeah, it's. I know it's difficult
Sure.
to create some sort of guidepost based on like a very American context, but you know, I'm just
Sure.
trying to get a broader sense of the PTI and Khan and why, you know, they had the hearts and minds to the degree, like we're kind of burying the lead. They did incredibly well, and despite all of this
very well.
interference in the election, including the shutting down of the internet and of the of cell phone service on election day.
Absolutely, and you know, like they have to be commended because they ran a brilliant insurgent campaign. Their technology teams are you know, like very, very, you know, their digital media teams particularly did a fantastic job. I mean, what PTI represents, right? And this is part of the reason why the military fell out with them and fell out with Imran Khan. But what they represent essentially is the same thing that the military has always tried to represent. Okay? The military has always had three main ideological sort of narratives that it's promoted to gain popularity as an institution. Pakistan is a country full of disparate ethnicities and languages, you know, I mean, and so one of the things the military has always wanted is strong central government, strong power concentrated in the center, essentially, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is the military has always believed in Islam as a binding force for society. And then the third thing that the military has always believed in is hyper-nationalism. You know, there's a forever war going on with our eastern neighbor, India, you know, like, and that sort of, you know, like forms a large part of, you know, like the nationalistic identity in Pakistan. Well, look, Imran Khan believed in all of those things, but because he's a charismatic politician, he was able to embody all of those ideas better than the faceless institution that is the Pakistan Army, right?
Right.
And because he became like a better representative of all of those ideas, he also became incredibly dangerous. And this is why, I mean, the really interesting thing, Emma, is, I mean, I remember, I was much younger then, but I mean, I remember the Musharraf years, the Musharraf dictatorship, right? And there were always a whole bunch of people. There was always a segment of society based, I mean, you'd call them sort of middle class, upper middle class, military brats, people who, you know, like had some affinity towards the West, that thought that General Musharraf was pretty good for Pakistan, right? Virtually all of those people ended up supporting Imran Khan, right? So you can sort of see the synergy between like the military establishment and Imran Khan for a while. But then you can also see why they, but then you can also see why they fell out so spectacularly, because Khan is just better at all the things the military wants to be good at, right? In terms of, you know,
is it a
promoting
threat?
a message.
His popularity as a figurehead, and perhaps the fact that he's more populist in the way he in the way he brands himself, less controllable. Is that part of the fallout?
Well, I mean, absolutely. And let's be fair to the guy. You know, whether you like his politics or not, he's incredibly resilient. He's the only political leader in this country, perhaps after Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who was able to bring together, you know, people from every province in this country of disparate identities. And you know, and there is a part of him that sort of transcends, you know, the way in which politics has traditionally been conducted in this country. He has managed to reflect the aspirations of the majority of Pakistan's voting population, or the majority of people who turn out to vote. And that's commendable. But yes, he is uncontrollable, and he is self-guided, and you know, he is willing to do pretty much anything in the pursuit of power.
And so where does that leave now that first, what did the results show? I mean, we've kind of hinted at it, but what were the results, and where does that leave Pakistan today?
Gosh, what does one say to that? I mean, the phrase eternal recurrence of the same sort of, comes to mind when discussing Pakistani elections. I mean, I think every reporter who reports on Pakistan is destined to tell the same story for their entire careers. What happened on election day was essentially this. The polls closed somewhere around The polls closed somewhere around 5 p.m. Okay? 3 or 4 hours after the polls closed, we started receiving like a whole bunch of results. These were media projections, but they were based on solid reporting on the ground. And Imran Khan, it was clear, had won a sensational victory. I mean, it was either, he was leading commandingly in a whole bunch of constituencies, many more than he ended up winning. And then mysteriously, the Election Commission of Pakistan issued a statement or briefed reporters that all the results that were coming on the television were wrong. And they're then sort of, what succeeded this was this kind of like interval of several hours when we received no results at all, which made everyone really suspicious because we know what that usually means, right?
Right.
And by the time in the early hours of Friday morning, we started to get results again, a lot of the seats where PTI was leading had flipped and they'd gone to PMLN. And I just want to make one point, a lot of your listeners, might not be familiar with, the electoral system in Pakistan, right? Under Pakistan's parliamentary democracy, you don't actually have to flip that many seats to make a huge difference, right? So let's say out of 266 seats, the results of 20 were manipulated. They went from one party to another. Well, that's already a difference of 40, right? Because, one party has 20 fewer and the other party has 20 more. And it is the difference between forming a government and not forming a government, as it turns out. You asked me about the results, Emma. I mean, my question to you is like the official results, what do they tell us? The official results tell us that something strange has happened. What does this election tell us? This election tells us something very different. This election tells us that the people of Pakistan are a bit too savvy to be fooled by this, and that they're essentially democratic. That's another thing. I mean, the big criticism of Pakistani sort of voters, and I don't think it's a fair criticism, is that they don't get out on the streets and they don't protest for their democratic rights. It's very difficult to do when there's such a huge gap between your aspirations and your socioeconomic status and that of the people, whether it's Imran Khan or Nawaz Sharif or anyone else who will end up governing you. But they still defied pretty much every tactic in the book. I mean, PTI, the one I talked about, repetitive elections, like the same story repeating itself again and again and again. The one thing that I think is worth pointing out is this level of repression is unprecedented in Pakistan's history, and this level of manipulation is unprecedented as well. So what it says for Pakistan,
and the opposition to it signaled a deep understanding of trying to push back against that democratically.
Yeah, absolutely. But then there's another point that also needs to be remembered, which is something like 40% of Pakistan's population is considered young. Okay, are young people. They're under the age of 35. They're a bit more hopeful, a bit less cynical, and they're also thick and feel no affinity towards the politics of the other two main parties. I mean, those parties are dynasties, right? They're political dynasties. I mean, what will happen if whenever the PMLN comes into power, you find like 5 members of the same family holding like 5 of the top posts in the land, right? And the PPP is exactly the same. You had Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, then you had his daughter, now you have her son, and her husband's been president and will be president again. And her husband's sister will probably be like the chief minister of Sindh or something, right? People have had enough, Imran represents, at least in his person, represents a break from that, and there is some merit in that, I think, and I think it's impressive that he managed to galvanize so many voters despite all that he and his party had to suffer. I mean, they couldn't campaign.
Right. They would get thrown in jail.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean it's fascinating, or at least even if the politics are so wildly insufficient and very much the same as you say, it at least represents an opposition and potentially a glimmer of hope for like breaking these kind of recalcitrant parties is basically my takeaway from speaking with you.
Sure, and there is one complicating factor though. I mean, I think if you're not from Pakistan, you're a sort of a Western journalist and you're sort of observing this country, you know, like the fact that you have the public coming out in support of Imran Khan in this way is sort of a heartening story. And actually, you know, like as a Pakistani journalist, I find it, you know, uplifting to an extent as well, even though I've never supported him. But as a progressive, you know, the question is a little bit, you know, the issue is a little bit more complicated. And what I mean by that is, you know, if you look at any left-wing Pakistani, any progressive in this country, what they've always wanted is for democracy to take root, to really flourish, for the people's voice to be heard, and for change to be achieved through the ballot box, right? But the fact that a right-wing populist is the person who came closest to doing that is unsettling, or at least tempers the triumphant nature of this result, if that makes sense.
It certainly does. That's very helpful in my understanding, and then also just, you know, for our audience, if we're here in the West, it's just it's hard to discern from the way that many of our media and reporters cover this. So really appreciate your time today, Hasan Ali. We'll link to your piece in The Nation on this very topic wherever folks are listening to or watching this. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Really pleased to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, folks, with that, we're going to wrap up the first hour of this program and head into the fun half. This is a fun I am from Nostra Dumbass. What pisses me off about you missing days, Emma, is the same... That's a fun start. Is the same thing I used to get pissed at Michael about. Oh, I'm sure, you know, he was shaking in his boots. You have a cake job that's 15 hours a week. I imagine there are plenty of journalists out there that would be in perfect bliss and make sure they were there for those 5 days a week. It's 3 hours a day. You get the sunrises and sunsets. Think of all these people who show up at work when it's dark and leave when it's dark. All day you see is fluorescent lighting. Also, I figure Sam doesn't care unless he has to come in on a Thursday. He could take a month off and he should be able to count on his crew to cover it. It's the Sam Seder show. You have a response to that, Matt? First of all, I just wish, or if you had ever IM'd anything to Michael, and I would like to know which day so I can go back and listen to that episode. Bro,
I would like the idea. I like the idea that like the only
work we do is when we're on air.
Is like live. Yeah, I mean, look, that's true of a lot of maybe Twitch streamers.
No,
with hue lighting in the background, but no, actually, you know, I don't really feel super insecure about that. That is very that's beautiful.
It's
please keep IMing. We should put that person straight to the top.
I know, honestly. I mean, first of all, it makes you pissed off that I take the odd Thursday off. Because
I like harboring this from Michael.
Yeah, I know. It's really, really upsetting. Let me just say this. First of all, I also I think Sam sometimes likes to do the show by himself. I like to have him be able to like do whatever he wants and cover it in his way too, because I get my Thursdays. And you don't even know if I do work from home, do other things. There's other things that make the show running.
The thing is like this show, you're kind of always working. Because you need to keep abreast of like everything that's going on. Like say you're have a guy on who was for instance, trauma doctor at a Gaza hospital, and then you're realizing like at the moment when you're scrolling Twitter, what you'd think is kind of trying to like maybe get some emotional distance from what you're seeing, you're actually noticing that that hospital is being currently assaulted by the IDF now. So yeah, like I mean. I actually think this might be a joke.
It might be, but like
it's great though. I'd really like the bit.
Damn.
If it is.
I mean, I didn't actually get mad. It was just funny. It was just funny.
Yeah.
But keep it up. All right.
But we also have Brandon Sutton and Matt Binder.
Oh, we do. Yes.
Who I will
bring them in. Let me just say though, today on ESPN is the day where Bradley succumbs to the punishment that he because he lost our season-long NFL against the spread competition. We've got ranch dressing soda that he's going to be drinking. What else? What are the other things?
What were your final records?
Let me find it. Below 500.
That's important to know, I think, just as an anti-gambling PSA, that both of these people who know more about football than I do, and I really have ever, basically pissing in the dark.
Yeah. Well,
29-33-1, 28-31-4.
That's why we didn't bet actual money on this. And we decided we were going to do a disgusting food situation.
I brought a shot glass and some Pepto-Bismol.
I mean, the idea that you're going to have just a shot glass of some of these sodas, I didn't want to contradict you before the show, but you're going to have more than that.
There's 6 of them.
I had to eat tons of blue cheese. We'll talk about this. We'll talk about this off air.
Buffalo wing,
yeah,
bacon,
yeah,
corn,
it's disgusting, and it'll be. I'm sure I'll feel bad halfway through.
Pumpkin pie, excuse me.
Anyway, youtube.com/ESPN show if you want to see that today. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Sorry. I was just thinking about I people are wondering does prep go into that show? I watch Joe Rogan. I mean, I do watch it 4 times speed, but you know how awful it is to watch Joe Rogan talk to Aaron Rodgers about previous episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience. But anyway, sorry. Left Reckoning. What did we do? Oh, York Hawkin, who Matt Binder has had on the show, Russian socialist, to react to Vladimir Putin's history lesson with Tucker Carlson, who, I like Igor. He had a lot of interesting points on, particularly on, the revelation that when Tucker asked Putin if he sees the supernatural at work, and Putin says no, as a not only a Russian socialist but also LGBT, Igor said it's nice to know that he actually isn't sort of apocalyptically religious, but it's the next question is why are you imposing this sort of right-wing reactionary bullshit onto the country that you control? Check that out, patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
Do check that out. We're getting a bunch of funny IMs right now. Maybe I'll read these later. What's up, guys? How you doing?
Hey.
How
you doing?
Wow, look at that. You got a little headset there. Your mic was failing you, right?
It was failing to, connect, and I'm also just out of my office for today, so I'm having to do my little cruise ship microphone. So, stick with me. I'll show you where your lifeboats are, show you how to get to the Pinnacle deck. You'll have a great time. Probably.
Wait, this is a cruise ship? What?
He's
no, that's a joking. I'm saying the headset makes me look like I'm on a cruise ship.
It does.
Oh, I was gonna say if I get a phone call from an 800 number, then it might be Brandon trying to sell me something. Yeah.
So sell us something. Sell us the discourse, Brandon.
Yes, I published the episode on House Hunters that I did with Matt. And I'm very excited for everyone to listen to it and to judge us the same way that we judge people on the show.
Yeah.
I want to clarify that we are not arguing that the show is real. We are merely talking about the show as though it is real. Because it's more fun. It's more fun that way.
Yeah.
And we should have another episode for you out next week, and I'll just keep the content train pumping. Oh, it's on SoundCloud. It's on my SoundCloud, which you can find on my Twitter.
All right. Check that out, folks. Binder, Doomed in Scam Economy.
Yep. This week on the show at youtube.com/Matt Binder, I had American Muslims for Palestine's Mohammed Abe on the show to talk about what's been happening in Gaza and what they've been doing here in the U.S. to raise awareness and disrupt events. Check that out, youtube.com/Matt Binder. Also doomedcast.com for the podcast version of the show. And correct me if I'm wrong, I overheard that as a punishment, Bradley has to drink sodas. That's not a punishment. That sounds like a fabulous.
You should be showing these sodas on air. Actually,
they're ranch flavored.
Bender, one of them is
dressing.
ranch dressing flavored. One of them is sweet corn flavored. One of them is
but you know what?
Flavored.
Something about how soda is with like the bubbles and everything. I'm sure it's gonna taste great regardless.
I mean, here
Bender.
we go. We got some of these. Thank you for the
Bender,
prop.
I appreciate the
Look at
kind words.
I mean, buffalo wing. Ranch. This is Kowalski that sent us this ranch
Good.
dressing.
I would drink it.
There we go. This one,
The
thank you.
The sweet corn one is the one.
Sweet corn is the one that he's most.
That's the one I'm really not looking
about.
forward to.
Right. Well, because it looks like pee.
Yeah.
Sweet corn soda that's just like every soda. Every soda is sweet corn soda.
It's the distilled.
Honestly, that
element
tastes like America. I mean, with all our corn subsidies and everything.
Try going to the Iowa caucus and telling them that you don't want to drink sweet corn soda. You'll end up with like Chris Christie's numbers.
Right, Bradley, you better watch out. Any future, political career you want to have.
Yep.
You said you didn't like sweet corn soda. What the hell is wrong?
Why do you, that'll be your mustard on the burger moment.
Yeah.
They may grab that clip 30 years from now to use against you.
Obama was right about that. Mustard is a top tier burger condiment. Mustard, mayonnaise, no ketchup. That's an adult burger.
I love
mustard, mayonnaise, no ketchup.
No ketchup, except maybe on the side for dipping. Yes, I'm a burger dipper.
Oh, I hear that. I do. Sometimes I'll do both.
I mean, I can do the no ketchup, but I can't do the mayonnaise in place of.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry to hear that.
Trilly Flops says, Emma, obviously you don't exist when I don't see you on the show. So if you're not live, you're not working. And if people have quote unquote harder job than you, then your need for time off is legitimate.
Emma, you should just actually all the time should be streaming. So like when you come in and just read the news.
Yeah.
I mean, some people do, I guess, read like Wikipedia on stream and monetize it. So I guess we are leaving money on the table.
Yeah. Yeah, we could do that. We could just do the show with no prep and it would make things easier. And then, Nostra Dumbass would feel a little bit better about my work schedule.
Oh, that's who tweeted him?
Yeah.
Oh, I think it might have been a bit.
He's continuing to write in and saying it's not a bit. So
that makes it sound more like a bit.
It's like when you're in a One Flew Over a Cuckoo's Nest, you can't prove that you're not crazy because everything you do makes you look more crazy anyway.
Yep. All right. Anyway, 646-257-3920. That's right. Yeah, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it to my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. African. And the alpha males are black, 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 black. And the Africans are back, 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 back. Black, black, black.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black. Alpha males are black, black. Africans are back, back.
Come on. Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
Back.
We are back, folks. It is the fun half of this program. Just open up the phone lines. Again, the number is 646-257-3920. Mr. Spiff Twitch says, bad mouthing sweet corn soda. Now try that in a small town.
I've been to small towns. I think you could probably badmouth sweet corn soda.
Jobby Boonier says, what pisses me off, Emma, is that you don't have solidarity with your coworkers. How dare you not drink the same gross sodas that Bradley has to drink? You think your failure at picking sports ball winners is somehow less deserving